Good morning. It's Tuesday. I believe it is the 20th of August. I cannot believe that we are that far into 2024. And it means we're 20 days into our new forms. Now, I'm Alyssa Schwartz. I'm the managing broker of the Realty One Group office. And welcome to the Tuesday Training and Tactics. We have a few people live here, and we've got some folks online. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so everybody can see just a little slide deck while we're going. Let me share that, and then hopefully that'll work. Okay, so I don't know if I can do the slideshow version. We'll try to do that. I titled this The Impact of the Forms, Agents, Title, Lending. How are things going? We're 20 days in, and I'm seeing a bunch of fun stuff. So I'll share with you a few things, and then we're going to talk to Art. But folks, if you have questions on your forms before you write a contract, maybe you should give me a call. Hopefully you've watched the videos first. For those that don't know, in my email every week, I'm linking those 3 videos called WTF, What's That Form? So please go watch those forms, the videos on how to use those forms. I'm going to do a new one on the rental forms because they are a little bit different, and getting a lot of confusion on the rental forms. Let's see if I brought up one of the forms. Oh, look, this is from one of my training sessions, and I thought, as we know, things are changing. So I think that we brought this around before August 1st, before we had the new forms in place. Lois, somebody there? If you can turn your mics off because we are recording. This is a slide that we had from before, and I just wanted you to know that on the bottom of this, it said, if you're adding language to the purchase contract, please, and don't write this down. Please use the word compensation and not commission to represent paying an agent. And guess what? Since August 1st, has that changed a little bit? I think that's changed because you know what? That bottom note would not say that at all now. It would say, do not use the words compensation or commission in the purchase contract at all. Okay, use the forms. The forms have what they need to say. If you're writing something in the contract, you would only be writing in concessions, and they cannot say anything to do with buyer broker compensation. And I've got puzzled looks around me for throwing that out to you. But it's really important to remember we've changed the word from commission to compensation. But again, in the purchase contract, there are 2 ways or 3 ways of being paid, right? You can be paid via the CAB form. That is not a part of the purchase contract. That is between broker to broker. Has nothing to do with the purchase contract. Or you can get the seller compensation agreement. Addendum, excuse me. It should be seller compensation addendum. That is an addendum to the purchase contract. And let's see if I've got a copy of that. Oh, I didn't put the top of that on there, but I'm showing you a fun thing. This is truly, this is representative of something I received, actually not once, but twice in the last 20 days, right? And can somebody tell me how many pineapples the buyer broker is going to get on here? Can somebody, even online, you can jump out and tell me how many pineapples does the buyer broker get because of the way this is written? So 2. I have somebody saying 2. Anybody want to match that or add to that or change that?
None.
None. Okay, none. All right.
Seller broker has agreed to compensate buyer broker in the amount of 2 pineapples.
Okay, and then it says, this compensation, see in bold there, and it's in bold twice, right? Line 13, this compensation is in addition to any seller concessions credited to buyer in the contract. Remember, I said if you have concessions, fine, if applicable. But then let's look at 14 through 16. Pursuant to a separate written agreement, what agreement would that be, folks? What's that called? Separate written agreement?
Buyer.
CAB, right? CAB. Seller broker has agreed to compensate buyer broker in the amount of 2 pineapples, dot, 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 which is independent of, and oh, look, in bold again, in addition to the compensation in this addendum. So how many pineapples have we just agreed that the seller is compensating the buyer for? Our brand new agent wins the, yes, 4 pineapples. And I have seen this twice. Once when we represented the seller that they had signed, sealed, and put it into the contract. Yay! It's like, do you understand what you just obligated your seller to? No, it's 2. I'm like, no, it's not 2 pineapples. It's 4 pineapples.
Whoa.
They're like, what do you mean? Like, okay, read 14 through 16. He read it. He got to the 2 pineapples. He said, see, 2 pineapples. I'm like, keep reading. In addition to. Okay, so please understand, you need to read these contracts. Now, this particular deal actually got a little more messy, which actually saved our client, or I hope it did, or our and our agent, because you can imagine who's probably going to be paying those 2 pineapples, right? If you make that mistake, folks, I hope you're owning up to it. That's on you. So, okay, so here's the thing. I don't know if you can read this on the bottom. My little guy's in the way here, so I'm gonna move that out of the way. And I'm just summarizing, but basically it said something to the effect of the buyer broker agrees that they will only receive 2 pineapples from the seller, and that will fulfill the buyer broker agreement. What is wrong with that statement? Now, remember, who wrote this? Who wrote this addendum? Which realtor wrote it?
The buyer's agent.
The buyer broker wrote it. Okay, but who's not a party to the contract? No, the seller's a party.
The buyer's agent.
The buyer's agent is not a party to the contract. So how does the buyer broker modify the buyer broker agreement on the seller compensation addendum? They're not a party to the addendum. Where should you modify your buyer broker agreement?
That's SCA.
This is the SCA.
Oh. Your buyer, where should modify your buyer broker?
Which addendum? Do you know that we've got a brand new agent?
Well,
She's
the cab, I mean.
Well, the cab is between brokers. This isn't the buyer broker agreement is between whom? Buyer and the buyer's agent.
Right.
So what form do you use to modify something between the buyer and the buyer's agent? Or
The
buyer
buyer
broker?
tenant employment agreement addendum?
Yes, there's a new addendum for that. There's an addendum that's the buyer addendum to the buyer agreement, employment agreement, right? So that is the only place you can modify your buyer broker employment addendum. Whether it's the specific property or the exclusive employment, or it's the tenant employment, there is an agreement that is between those two. So having the buyer broker write this down here, the funny part is, what did he actually explain that everybody understood when they wrote this was that there were only 2 pineapples. So I told our agent to go back to the buyer broker and say this whole thing could go away. They had a cab form. They didn't need this. Right? The cab form already said 2 pineapples. They don't need this addendum. And it was written so badly with this additional terms and conditions. I'm like, just get rid of it. Tell the buyer broker and get the buyer and everybody that this is going away, because this is not correct at all. Otherwise, they'd have to delete 14 through 16 and 23. All this has to go away, right? Or they delete line 10. And if you delete line 10, there's no reason for this agreement, right? It doesn't make any sense. So those are the types of things I'm having fun seeing. What are you guys seeing? Should we go to Rock? And Roberta is not here. Hold on.
Yeah,
I don't know if I can get I need to see what I look like here so I can make sure I'm not putting that thing in there.
Well, so I was gonna, as a landowner, and confirm that the new term that's supposed to be used in place of the buyer broker exclusive employment agreement is now the cab, right?
No,
No, okay.
No, the CAB is compensation agreement between brokers. That has to do with what the seller's broker is paying the buyer broker. The buyer broker exclusive employment agreement is between the buyer and the buyer broker.
And that one's still okay from August of, obviously the August of 24 one. Okay.
There are actually two of them. One's an agreement to show property and one is an exclusive employment agreement. And you won't see the third, which is the tenant employment agreement. So, again, the CAB and the seller compensation addendum they're the way that the brokers get paid, but they're not the way that, the agreement is made. The agreement between the buyer broker, which is what you as a lender need to see, that buyer broker agreement, because you need to see what the buyer has been committed to verify if they have those funds.
Absolutely. So the two that I've gotten so far are the buyer broker exclusive agreement. One was dated 22 and one was dated 24. But someone's using the old one.
Oh, lots of people use.
And on the old one, it states up to 4% of total purchase price. I haven't seen that. I'm sure that's not correct.
No, that cannot be on the new buyer broker addendum. So
I just got that yesterday.
So really to answer the question, you see you say cab, it doesn't pertain to sort of that call.
correct.
So if you see a cab, then you know there's error.
Okay,
That is too true.
but the buyer broker should be the one dated August of 24.
Yes,
And it should not say up to, it should have a specific number, correct?
ascertainable amount.
You do not want to rank.
There's no range allowed. Okay, we're gonna go to Art, and I think I got your form in here. Whoops.
Good.
I did any change to settlement statement. I got it below. So, and then I do have a question though. I'll go to the settlement statement in just a minute. Are you being sent the buyer broker agreements on your files?
Yeah.
Depends. What does it depend on?
The agent.
Depends on the agent.
So,
Depends on the agent.
so,
I received two contracts yesterday. One had a seller's compensation addendum on it, showing that the seller was gonna pay 3% to the buyer's broker.
Okay.
Had another contract where it wrote in the additional terms and conditions that the seller would pay 3% to the buyer broker.
in the contract?
In the contract, in the additional terms and conditions.
Section 8 you're talking about?
Yeah, section 8.
In additional terms.
Okay, but that wasn't my question. Are you receiving the buyer broker agreements?
I have on occasion too.
Okay.
I mean, it all depends on the, I mean, and I think where we're at right now is we're at the very beginning of a long learning process.
Yes,
I think.
as everybody online can.
Soon to be modified as we go.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It's being modified.
Well, and here's one that will be modified, because if you were at our earlier training, you heard me say you should be sending your buyer broker agreement to both the lender
Yes.
and to title,
Yes.
right? You heard
Right.
me say
Yes.
that. I am now gonna change that.
No, don't change it.
Do not send your buyer broker agreement to title
Really?
or the other agent. Now, let me ask you this, how many of you as listing agents sent your ERs to title? Close your mouth.
Well, yeah, sure, I did.
You really? Are you sure?
No way, no, no.
You probably signed a compensation form from the title company, but did not send VER.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So because the buyer broker agreement is like the ER, it is an employment agreement. It is a personal employment agreement between you, the broker and the buyer, and really doesn't belong to anybody else except for the lender, because the lender has to verify the funds are there, okay? So and we have had other companies ask our agents for the buyer broker agreements before they respond to the purchase contract. And the answer is no. No. And by the way, would you send me your ER? And they're like, well, no, I can't. I'm not gonna send you that. That's my own agreement with my client. Well, yes, it is your own employment agreement, and this is my employment agreement with my client. Okay, so you had a question?
I was, because I've been reviewing your videos.
Sure.
And there was a part today I heard you said, get your client's phone, take a picture of it so that they have it in case they ask your client, do you have a buyer broker? And they can just show it to them. Okay. So do they really want to see what is on there?
No,
No.
no, but you could do the top part. You could probably white out over it. just showing that you do have a signed buyer broker. You don't have to show the amounts on that buyer broker agreement.
Can't
But
show
the
it,
idea
right?
is saying like, yes, I do have an agreement and I have signed an agreement. And I am aware I've signed an agreement. But you are correct. You should probably block out what the amount is, right?
I have a question on the settlement statement at the end of the transaction. If there is a gap between what the seller is giving and what the seller has committed, that has to be on the settlement statement, correct?
Correct. But here's the question. How does that show up on the settlement statement? Because I'm gonna bet it shows up just like if I'm crediting for, oh, let's say a home warranty. Because it's coming from me as the buyer broker to my client. The fact that it isn't $600 and it's $2,500 or $3,000 doesn't really matter. It's a credit from me to my client. It does not come through somehow saying, ooh, overage available for buyer.
No,
No.
I mean for the buyer, if the buyer has to pay 0.5%, say,
I understand.
then it would be a cost showing on the.
Oh,
settlement
if the
statement.
buyer is paying it.
Well, because if the buyer has agreed to pay you or
Yes.
anyone else 3% and the seller has only agreed to 2.5%, we have to
Correct.
show that 0.5% on the settlement statement. So at
Yes.
the end of the day, everyone
And
will
it gets
know.
credited to the,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I mixed that up. You were asking a different question. I was talking about if the buyer broker agreement said 2.5% and the seller was contributing 3%. Nobody is gonna see that line item saying there was a 0.5% adjustment. I could have been getting 3% and decided at the last minute, I'm giving a 0.5% credit. Nobody is gonna know that because they have not seen my buyer broker
Right.
employment agreement. But what you're talking about is if the buyer does owe something
Mhm.
and the buyer agent is collecting that, yes, the buyer would then be giving the buyer broker a 0.5% or whatever the amount
Whatever, yeah,
is,
right.
right?
Half a
on
pineapple.
a half a pineapple, right? Half a pineapple. We'll get some fruit salad here. And yes, that would show up on a settlement statement. Now,
why does this take so long? This is the
What-
longest taking Starbucks I've ever been to.
Uh, you might want to mute whoever's talking. I can't get to my screen. We're glad you're at Starbucks. You could bring us some.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you taking orders? Oops. Hold on. Let me go back to this. All right, Art. We have your commission instructions, form. Now, has this changed at all?
It hasn't changed yet. My understanding though, it is being reviewed to be changed. And what we're talking about, me and Roberta have also discussed it, not at length, but we've discussed it some. Is that the broker instructions probably need to be modified to show who's paying as well, the buyer or the seller, when they send it their commission instructions, so we know. I mean, theoretically, it should all be spelled out, but the more you can clarify, the easier it's gonna be for everybody, and less confusion is gonna be for everybody. So I'm guessing they're gonna work on this form here
Yeah,
and add another line to say paid by buyer, paid by seller.
right.
You know, or split 25, but they've gotta make it a little bit more clear
Right.
for us.
And so for those that have not used Rock Title and maybe not seen this, most of the title companies have something similar. They'll send it to you because we have our CDI, which basically overrides this. This is simply showing the percentage going to each brokerage, not who's getting paid with that, right? And so ours is so much more involved because we have multiple people and multiple checks going out there, splits and all sorts of things, with agent teams, like if we've got teams up there. So I do think you're probably gonna see some additional information. I have not seen our CDIs modify, because ours are simply showing who is getting paid, not where the money's coming from. So yours probably is gonna have to have that detail. Has anyone online or in person here seen anything that has had that change? We haven't closed many, right, under the new forms. We're still closing the old forms. And I do want to make a point here. I mean, I know it's after the 17th, so everybody now should be on board. There was a lot of confusion on I don't know, the 5th, the 8th, the 12th, the 15th, that our forms had not gone into effect yet. Please understand, in the state of Arizona, when AAR releases new forms, Those forms are to be used upon date of release. That's why they explain to everybody they're coming out August 1st. They're coming out August 1st. That means you use them on August 1st. There were different associations across the state that started their dates on August 17th to match the date required by NAR. AAR with 18 forms that changed or were new, right? Combination of the two, chose not to align with that date. They wanted them out in advance. And we have our soon to be NAR treasurer here, and I see he's wanting to say something. So Craig, Craig,
dying to.
The rationale is that strictly legal law. If you were to be pulled into court, the first question you're gonna be asked was this the most current form that you should have used? And if you didn't use that, now you're already in trouble by using an outdated form. So I think to know the background that protects you legally is very important.
the problem is, right? What happens with all these contracts I have that are on 2022 forms? Am I supposed to just throw them back and say you don't have a valid contract? I mean, buyer and seller have agreed to the terms of the contract. That becomes a problem because by the time I review it or compliance reviews it, it's already executed, and in some cases, they've already done inspections. So trying to roll that back, but to Craig's point, the reason we stress so much of the dates these start is if you end up in court, you are absolutely correct, Craig. The court is going to say, were these the most recent forms? And if the answer is no, who does that come back to?
Well, it's a standard of care issue.
Right, it's a
That's
standard of
the
care.
biggest hang up you're gonna have is you did not exercise the best standard of care for your client.
And so who's going to be responsible for that? The agent is, right? And the agent and I put it on both agents though. Not only the agent writing it, but the agent receiving that, they should have replied back and said, send me a new offer. I can't accept this. It's on the wrong contract form. Now, the irony is I've seen in our files a 2022 purchase contract with a 2024 agency form, which tells me the agent full well knew that there were new forms. They just chose not to use the purchase contract because they didn't understand it and didn't want to go down that road. Now, in a court of law, who's going to get hung on that one? That agent, that buyer's agent is going to get hung on that one because the agency form was the 2024 form. So they fully had new forms in their files. They just chose not to use it. So the hope is, I'll knock on some wood, right? The hope is that that file or those files don't either get audited or go to court for some reason. But this is why our compliance people are, contacting you saying these are the wrong forms, folks, and you need to use the correct one. But one of the problems using the old form is, where's compensation? There's no seller compensation addendum box to check. There was no seller compensation addendum attached. There was no cab attached. Wonder how they're getting paid. So you guys got to figure that one out because otherwise you're not going to get paid. And I did have a contract come through that had none of those on there. And I asked, how are you getting paid? I don't know. Haven't seen the new documents. Waiting to find them. Otherwise, that was a nice pro bono as I heard a realtor say in some panel the other day, well, lawyers do several pro bonos a year. Maybe realtors should start doing pro bono files. Like, thanks. I don't know we're not quite paid like attorneys most of the time, but okay. So, all right, let's look at anything else with the commissions. Any other? You're good?
Yep.
Title's good. We'll flip over. I got lending over there. She's busy multitasking. So Barb is here with EPiQ, and I should have, and Michael was not able to join us today. So I threw this in there because this actually came through the other day. And I'm going to jump on yours, but this came through and this is literally what it said. This was the buyer broker agreement.
So really didn't say anything.
No, no, but it was signed by everybody. It was signed and initialed. So you might want to double check when you get them that there's actually something in there. I know. So again, the lender needs to see this because, right, the buyer is agreeing, line 32, buyer agrees to compensate broker as follows. And so it is the buyer's responsibility. So what have you seen?
So like I said, the only two that I've seen so far that have included them, one I asked for this morning because I had a contract over the weekend that didn't have it. And that one was on the correct form
Yay?
and was filled out correctly. It had a percentage on there
Okay.
of 2.5%, I believe. And like I said, the other one was incorrect on the old buyer broker from 22 and said up to 4% of a total purchase price. So I just sent them a text saying, hey, you need to use the new buyer broker agreement.
Please tell me that was not a Realty One Group agent.
Nope.
Oh, good.
I do have a question, Mark.
Yes.
You use the word total sales price. What constitutes a total sales price,
The contract sales price.
not final sales price?
Well,
In my
if
opinion,
the sales price changes due to appraisal, it would be based on whatever that
The final
sales price, yeah, it would be based on the final sales price.
I'm just curious about the vernacular.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard total. It's usually final sales price or purchase price. I usually just say purchase price. So, yeah.
Like I said, I don't normally even see those, so.
Yeah.
So to see the old one with that verbiage was a little off, but
Yeah.
that's what it had said on their buyer broker.
And just to clarify to everybody, the reason the new contract cannot say up to an amount is it has to be an ascertainable number. So for those that don't understand that, it has to be a set number, whether that's a percentage or a number, there can be no variables. And I've also heard the commentary that that the conversation with their buyer, Art, you're going to be my buyer. I'm so excited to be working with you, Art. And I'm really excited. I just want you to know that my commission is going to be, let's say 3 pineapples. I'm just having fun with those pineapples today, right? And I just want you to know, I know things are not, I know you're struggling to get ready for this. I just want you to know that, if we can't get that from the seller, don't worry, I'll take care of you. I'll reduce da 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 da. Oh my gosh, what did I just do? Like in my conversation after signing a document, a contract, I just changed verbally the terms on that contract. And what did I do? I gave a variable. If we can't get it, then I'll do this. Please, please, agents, understand you cannot do that. You just had somebody sign a contract, and part of the terms of that contract and the reason that contract was written that way very clearly states you cannot do something that is a range, that is an if then, right? You have to do a specific amount. Now, I've got a question here, and then I'm going to tell you a way that you can
Yeah. I think I know.
respond to that. Do you want to give it a try?
Well, no, that wasn't what I meant. What I meant was if you didn't have that conversation, if they only offered 2.5, I can adjust it. You can't say that. But I think you can actually adjust it if you don't have that conversation. If you have a conversation later, but that's not really helping your buyer because your buyer doesn't know that that can take place. Because I think you can change it.
There's no question you can change it.
Yeah.
Let's get to Priscilla's question. Did you have a question? Okay, I'm sorry. So let me go to what you can do, right? So to your point, you absolutely can modify your buyer broker agreement. In fact, earlier today, we even talked about the fact that there's a form to do that, right? There's a specific buyer broker employment agreement addendum to change that. You absolutely can modify it. What you can't do is offer up that it will automatically change, or if this, then this. You can say, And I would, again, keep it very vague. So Art, let's go back. Art, you're doing the down payment assistance. We know we're going to be asking for closing costs for you. We may be looking for a home warranty, right? You're a first-time home buyer. So my conversation is going to be, Art, as we go through this process, I want you to know that as your buyer's agent, one of the things that I will be doing is be looking to try to negotiate all of these things that you are looking for, right? Down payment assistance, home warranty, and the buyer broker compensation, right? There are three separate things. I'm not isolating in my conversation one or the other. I'm saying I'm going to help you because I'm going to try to negotiate those in the offer. But let me explain this to you, Art, right? We may come across homes that the seller's not going to be cooperative, or that your offer price is not one that they're willing to accept and cover all those things. And in those situations, we're going to have to sit down and go over all of those numbers together to decide whether or not this is a property you can move forward with, or perhaps you need to look for another property.
What if they specifically ask you?
If they ask you what?
So if we agreed on this buyer broker employment agreement, 3%, and they're only offering 2.5, how are we making up the difference?
So is that conversation happening when I'm writing that agreement?
I'm just saying, what if the question is asked by the buyer?
I understand. When you're writing the agreement.
Yeah.
You need to say, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to make any modifications to this or offer any modifications to this.
Again,
As I said, if we get to that point, we can come back and review all of the areas that the seller, all of your needs in terms of your closing
that
costs.
would be vague to me. If I was the buyer, and
Okay.
I heard that, I would be like, you're not answering my question.
With my earlier thought, they work in this situation. Write your offer. Write your offer for your buyer, with whatever you have for buyer compensation to buyer's agent. Send it to the seller. If and when that comes back in the form of a counter offer because it was not acceptable by the seller, then you can have all these conversations.
Yes.
Trying to make your deal work. Don't over compound the problem. Keep it back into a simple nature.
Right. And so that's what my point was, is you're going to have the conversation and you're going to get away from talking about compensation.
Right.
You're going to talk about the whole package. We're going to write the offer. We're going to negotiate for everything you need. It may be that if we get a counter offer or we don't get a response, buyer, you're going to have to look at whether or not this deal is the right deal for you. And you stay away from that specific line item question. If they point blank ask you, well, if they only offer this amount, are you going to reduce? Your answer has to be, I cannot answer that question at this time. As I said, we can review the whole package. This is what my compensation is, period. Because under the settlement, you have to have a specific amount that you are to be paid. And let me just point out something, folks, that one of the reasons these specific things, the specific number has to be there. And I think one of the concerns that we have not been talking about, and Craig, I'm not going to put you on the seat here, is fair housing, right? Because I think people are not considering the possible implications of fair housing here and fair dealings with everyone, right? Could you potentially be in a fair housing violation if you offered one person some pineapples and another person, less pineapples, and then a different person a couple of peaches, whatever? You're not being consistent with what your buyer broker agreement is as you go through this. Oh, Craig is going to comment.
Regardless of what Rob has stated, regardless of the ongoing discussions with the DOJ, the arguments that we're trying to put forth are exactly this: fair housing, also steering. So these are two big issues that we have to pay attention to. And the variable commission is a big one, and the workarounds that people are trying to talk about are only going to get you the eyes of the DOJ.
Right.
I guarantee it.
Right. And for those that don't know, as of the 18th of August, we are all on the table to being able to be sued again. The settlement and the protections of the settlement are now concluded. And if someone wants to sue under new claims of impropriety or, failing to protect your client, et cetera, they can certainly do that. And I think that's why I'm trying to stress, please be very careful, because I am hearing a lot of people say, here, sign this. It says X pineapples, right? But don't worry, I'll take care of you on the back end. Do not say that. That is a complete violation and completely against what you just signed, right? So you have to come up with something that you are comfortable with, that you can express. Again, this example with Art, I never said we're going to talk about my compensation. I said, I'm going to help you look at whatever that counteroffer may be and see if it's the right transaction for you, because ultimately it may not work. Now, we all know, if you've done much real estate, we all know if the buyer is short by, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 grand, there's often call a friend, like call a family member, right? If that's all they're off, when all the numbers come down to a specific thing and they're off 3 grand on a $500,000 deal, if they really want the home, guess what? They're probably going to find a way to find 3 grand. Somehow, some way, right? And that's not up to you to take it out of your pocket, and don't start with that, right? Now, I don't know how many of you have been doing real estate for very long, but I've been doing it 27 years. If you start with a commissionectomy, you're going to get commissionectomied all the way through that deal, right? Oh, hey, I'll pay 1,000. Oh, I'll pay 2. Oh, you want another 4,000? Yeah, I'll come in. I'll help you. I'll save the day. Don't start with it, folks. You may still need something before the end of the deal. And again, you absolutely can credit your buyer for something. But if you're always starting with, oh yeah, don't worry about that. I got you covered. If we can't get that, those 3 pineapples, I'll take care of you. Be careful what you throw out there. You don't need to do that. What you need to do is show your value. How are you at negotiating? Are you a good negotiator? I'll tell you what, I like to negotiate. And I'm going to work damn hard for my buyers and my sellers, right? So are you going to do that? I mean, this is your opportunity, right? What are you going to do for your clients? How can you support them? And I think too many agents are getting caught up in, oh my God, I can't have this conversation. I don't know how to have the conversation. Practice it. Find a friend, right? Find somebody that you can have the conversation like I did with Art. Hey, Art, I know we're going to be looking for a lot from these sellers. And I can tell you up front, not every seller is going to play ball with us. So please be careful if you fall in love with something. I'm going to be the realist for you. That's part of my job, to help you understand how you're going to make not only closing, right, but working with the lender to make sure that those payments are realistic payments. I don't know how many of you, Barb has laughed at me. I've told her this story. I've had buyers in the past that have told me, not a problem. I can afford, $2,500 a month. I'm only paying 14 now. It's not a problem. I can do it. I'm earning such a month. It's great. I'm like, really? I didn't, the lender didn't say that you had a lot in your reserves. No, we're saving. It's okay. We're saving. Like, I'll tell you what, spend the next 6 months, right? Spend 6 months every month when you write your rent payment for $1,400, right? Write yourself a check for that other $1,100 for that $2,500. You said you have the money. Put the $1,100 away in a savings account for 6 months. Let's see whether you can tighten your budget and make that happen. Do you know in 27 years, how many people have taken me up on it? It's a big goose egg. Not a single person has done that. And you know what? Those buyers also have never bought at that price point, right? Because they can't afford to, right? But the point is that part of your job is making sure you are that financial and we don't normally do finance, right? But you've got to be the one that's making sense of these numbers for your buyers and making sure they understand what all those costs are. Right? You're gonna have to have that. What are your estimated costs to come to close? You're gonna have to work with both title and lending to make sure you can put those numbers together so they can realistically look at what their offer packages mean. How much money are you coming out of pocket for? And it's not all about your commission. There are other things the buyer has to come in for. How many of you have had buyers say, wait a minute, I have to pay for the inspection? Like out of my pocket?
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that was part of my loan. No, not part of your loan, right?
How much is it?
And then I have to pay for the appraisal? Well, can I put that on my credit card? Well, maybe you need to talk to your lender. Do you have room on your credit card that you can do that? Like, right? So all those things need to be a part of your conversation. That's part of what you do. Craig's like, what?
So we estimated cost sheets prior to are gonna come back in vogue?
They are going to come back in vogue. And you guys know that we do have estimated cost sheets in our MLS system. We've got title people that have it. In fact, there's a new, can I say there's a new? What's it? Do we know what it's called? Okay, there is a new,
Not prison, but yeah.
there's a new form, Rock Title. There's a new cost estimate sheet coming out for you. It's an app that you'll be able to use on the go from Rock Title. We should have it by next month. I think by September it'll be rolling out. Very, very excited. It's one of the top apps to be able to put all those numbers in one place and be able to give it to your client. So very, very helpful. All right, I've got 15 minutes. Questions?
I just want to reiterate. Your statement about these things is entirely correct. With this last settlement, you've heard the statement blood and water. The water is very bloody. There are attorneys circling out there every day for something somewhere. And it's just, I mean, I have a weekly call with the leadership team, and there's always something on the legal front on that call. They're looking for you. They're looking for you. And what most people don't understand on this last settlement, with the coverage on over 1 million members, the reason for the class action and the reason for the settlement was that if the attorneys went out after all the brokerages and after all the agents, the cost would have been astronomically more than the 418 million. So basically, it's a protection mode for the agents and the smaller brokerages under the 2 billion market. But you're right. The DOJ, we're still in discussion with. We know that they're going to be watching. We're having a hard time getting them to come to understanding on what we do on the streets versus what they idolize in their legal world. And so we're working, but don't get lax. That's what it costs.
For those that don't know, that's Craig Sanford. He's the new NAR treasurer. You start officially when?
1st of December.
1st of December. How many miles have you traveled in your unofficial role?
Well, over the last 3 years, I'm up to 600,000. So
Little bit of travel for us. Thank you, Craig, for all you do. For those that don't know, Craig has been in this office for long before we were Realty One Group. He was with John Holland Associates. And so he is still a part of this office when he gets a chance to do any real estate, which is very little right now. But so we really do have a good insight there from somebody actually dealing with this that most of us are not a party to. Yes.
Since I'm very, very new.
Yes, we have a brand new agent, Priscilla, here.
I kind of assumed, which is probably not the smartest thing to do, but I thought as realtors, you would, especially now, try to look out for one another. Because I feel like I heard you say that not all sellers are gonna be willing to, cooperate. But aren't they sometimes on the other side of the transaction too, to where they would want the seller to cooperate? So whatever you would want the seller to do, shouldn't that what we?
So great question. I think, so let me make sure, are you asking if the agent is going to cooperate or the seller?
Well, aren't the sellers used to paying already? I mean.
Okay, so that is a great point. So in the past, yes, the seller has provided some type of compensation. It was always negotiable, and I think that the challenge is there are some people in the public that did not understand it was always negotiable. In our MLS prior to this new scenario, you had to offer $1 was all you had to offer to be a part of the MLS. Then they changed that to 0 when the lawsuit started, and of course now it's been removed. So I think it all depends on the seller. There are some sellers that adamantly today feel like I don't want to pay anything. And I think it is up to the agent to, again, negotiate with the seller to figure out what is in the seller's best interest. And let me give you an example. We have plenty of our agents that do take on properties that may be estate owned or not in great condition. They may be, an inheritance. They may be something that just the person's lived there 35 years and is going into nursing care, and the home needs to be sold quickly. Most investors deal with their own agents, with their own deals for their agents. They don't need the seller to compensate because they're trying to get the lowest possible dollar value to buy that home. So if I'm an agent representing a seller in that scenario, am I even recommending that they pay a buyer broker fee? Probably not, right? Because most of those buyers are already used to compensating for that. That is a given. Now, little different if you've got a totally fixed up, beautiful home that is going to be really all eyes on that home, and you want to get the best offer possible, right? So if you're looking for the best offer possible from a wide range of buyers, like I was used to say, who's the buyer? You look at the property and who is buying that? Are college, is some investor for college student buying it? Is somebody buying it for their own personal residence? Somebody buying it for an Airbnb? Depending on who the buyer is, depends on some of that information. And as you become more experienced in doing real estate transactions, you kind of get a feel for some of, who the buyer is and whether or not the seller might have a better opportunity not to offer any compensation. But I would say if it's, a prime property, target property with great renovations, it's all, it's all been remodeled, large lot, pool, 2 or 3 car garage, great location, all the things we look for, all the bells and whistles, right? If the seller doesn't offer some form of compensation, then in essence, each buyer is going to have to adjust to try and deal with that offer, right? They're going to have to adjust their offer to cover what they're seeing they're having to spend on their own buyer broker agreement. That's fine. But I think if you're looking at potential multiple offers, aren't you better off having the best of the best, the cream, right, of all those people against one another? Now, if you've been on the market for a while, you're trying to get people to come look at it. If you're not offering anything, how many eyes are going to be on that property, right? So there are going to be different things that are going to happen. And the reality is we can't watch that anymore. And I think that was part of the settlement's intent, was we can't see that it was offered at this price as a co-broke. Then it was offered at this price. Then it went up to this, and then it went down to this, right? We can't see any of that adjustment. But remember, that CAB form is only good for 10 days. So even if you call an agent, they say, yes, we're offering that. That verbal, well, not even that verbal, the written is only good for 10 days. So you looked at something on the 1st of August and you're looking at it on September 1st, you better be calling again. That offer of compensation does not have to still be there.
But even there's where I say, don't overcomplicate it. Write your offer, forget the CAD, write your offer with the buyer compensation to the buyer's agent, and present that, and let the seller and the seller's agent fight that.
I absolutely agree with you, Craig. And I think that that's what many of us, when we were teaching the classes, said, focus on that seller compensation addendum. Nothing wrong with making a phone call. And if they answer it, great, you get an answer. But I don't think you have to worry about it, right? Unless you have a scenario like I was talking to Art earlier, who's looking for down payment assistance. you need to know where they are, at least on one of those things, because you know you're gonna be asking for all of this, right? You've got to get everything stacked up if you've got somebody with a DPA program. But other than that, I mean, if you've got a buyer that has some cash to be able to play and participate, I think you write your offer, you use your seller compensation addendum, you put in what your buyer broker agreement says, and you move forward and you see where the chips fall, and you go from there. Did you have a question?
Well, it's just, could be a colossal waste of time if you can't move forward in the deal anyway.
Well, but the reality is if the seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy, don't you think there might be some place to come together?
Oh,
Well, then that's what you gotta do.
My comment with her is this: if you ask the question, you might get a no. If you write the offer, you might get a yes. Because
Correct.
now it's there for them to make a true decision.
Right.
Where you're gonna waste your time is if you don't have that dialogue with the buyer ahead of time to find out if they can even perform.
oh, I'm definitely.
So that's the conversation that needs to happen. The rest of it is a matter of what we've done for years. Write your offer. Look, I always say, if the seller, you don't know what the seller, I can't tell you what the seller, he can tell me this, he can change his mind.
I can't tell you how many times buyers have asked me, well, what will the seller take? Which of course, as a seller's agent, you can't say, but I'll tell you what, I've been in too many deals where the seller has told me, I won't pay a dime more, I won't take a dime less than da, 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 da. And all of a sudden we get an offer and they're like, we'll take it. And I'm like, what do you mean? Right? What? So I learned, probably after about 3 or 4 years,
The other part of that is if I'd have known that, I'd have bought it myself.
which by the way, you cannot do. You cannot flip that around if you're the listing agent. So, but no, seriously, folks, you don't know what a seller's going to do until they have the offer in front of them. And I had a seller once that we got an offer, it fell out, and they turned around, they wanted to go with one of those iBuyer thingamajigs, right? But no, iBuyer back then, it wasn't discount. iBuyer thing, because they just wanted the deal done. And I'm like, and this was back in the day for those of you that have not done real estate a while, where we had like a 6-month plan on how we actually marketed a property, because we were on the market more than 3 months. Really, we really did have this whole marketing plan. And the seller freaked out on me, and I didn't know why. And she finds she didn't have any cash. She couldn't pay her bills. But boy, what a different conversation it would have been when I took the listing and said, okay, this is going to be the marketing plan. In her mind, she just thought we were going to sell, which we did go under contract, but it didn't close. But it's like, why wouldn't you have told me that?
Yeah.
We would have listed it at a different price. We would have marketed it totally differently, right? And instead she went to an iBuyer. Fine, we got it sold and she bought her other property, but it was so amazing. They don't necessarily tell you everything, right? Or honestly, you could have somebody whose family member gets hurt or something else, and they've got to move up their timeline. They've got to move immediately and go across the country. And they're like, I just want the deal. I need it to be done. You never know what could have happened between your conversation with them last week and your conversation with them this week when you're presenting an offer. So I really think some of us are overthinking the first step so much, we're not moving forward and making offers on things.
Yeah, I make a phone call and ask the appropriate questions, and then one of the questions is there a Cobra? And then I was getting sometimes a little bit of a run around, put it in the offer.
That's right.
That's what you're gonna get from
Little
me,
bit of a
make
game.
your offer.
That's what you're going to get from, it's not a game at all. That's what you're going to get from me. Any of my listings that I'm going to put those lines blank and
So
put that
when I
information.
call as a listing agent, is there a Cobra? Yes, there is. It's 2.5%, and I'm happy to sign a cap if you want to send it over.
Great. If that's what your seller decides, I hope you're telling your seller there are options available.
I did, and I explained that there's a much higher buyer pool if you're actually offering a compensation.
And I 100% disagree with you. I believe
fine.
there are
I disagree.
buyers, I believe there are
disagree.
buyers out there that are gonna buy. And I bring it to the table. Bring it to the
There's a lot
table.
more if they're being compensated. No?
You're being compensated. It's your job to negotiate it. If you put it in the SCA, there's compensation there.
You're entering compensation before the offer. You're making that a part of the decision-making process. When it could actually be detrimental to the decision-making process in front of the seller.
Mhm.
Because you can't guarantee to me that the seller's gonna stay true to what they told you yesterday. Verbally versus.
Define by the listing or on top?
Yeah, the listing, you might say 2.5% today, but the buyer's SEA comes in at 3%. But the seller says yes.
So I don't think so would say yes, but. I don't know.
Well, but-
Is the
but
seller
what
going
would-
to make the determination based on compensation or on the overall net to the seller?
Definitely the overall next to seller.
And that's your job to try and present that, right? That's your job as agents to try and do that. I think we're getting so caught up in trying to put the cart before the horse. Get the offer out there. And on the listing side, I'm gonna present, yes, you can put a dollar price, and if that's what you want to do, great. But here's the thing, what happens if the buyer's broker only wants 2%? I don't know what they've negotiated. I don't know 2 pineapples or 16 pineapples. I have no idea. But you know what? If we tell them, present an offer, include it with your offer. I didn't say the seller's not paying it. I said, I've talked to the seller, they understand, and they're willing to look at it, right? Honestly, I think the person that this whole thing impacts the most are those buyers out there that look at properties that are at market value, the right price, they're listed really where they need to be, and they want to come in 15% low because they know what they're doing. I know what this home is worth. I'm not going to pay that price. You know what? And the seller's not going to play with you, right? Because you know what? You can deal with your own buyer broker fees. We're not taking that low of a price and then paying the 2.5%,
That's the counter on.
right? That's the counter offer. We're not doing that. But I'm not even sure they're counter offering those people.
Well, no,
Because-
but you're right.
Right.
Some of them aren't going to counter offer, but my point is, it goes back to the buyer to make a decision.
Right. And ultimately, agents, try not to put your personal impressions in the middle of the conversation. Focus on the net, focus on the concessions, the timing. What is this for your client? Whether it's the seller or the buyer. When do you need to close by? What are your terms? What are your conditions? How can we help this work for you? You need the down payment assistance. Awesome. How can we make that happen? Right? That's what I would recommend that you work on. Through the tenant broker exclusive employment agreement, I want to make sure those of you doing rentals, please know there is a different employment agreement, because guess what? There actually is a section here that says, line 32 to 34, or the compensation broker receives from landlord or landlord's broker, whichever is greater. Guess what? That language is in the tenant employment agreement. Why? Because this was not a part of the settlement. They can still do that on a rental. And I've got people that are using the buyer broker agreement and trying to set a specific price and then going, but I don't understand. Am I only getting $200 when they were offering, this amount or whatever? So if you're working with tenants and landlords, please use the tenant employment agreement, okay? And if you are representing a landlord, yes, in that scenario, find out what you're offering. Are you offering a set amount or a percentage? I think that was all I had, and I can go away from sharing there. So hopefully that helped you guys. Please come to me with questions if you have them. I think that there is a lot of good work being done out here. We have a lot of contracts being opened. So people are negotiating and finding ways to make this work. Seeing a lot of new activity and excitement because of the interest rates going down a little bit. Hope you have a great week. Any last minute question before we shut this down? Anybody online want to unmute? Got a couple of people out there. Look at all these people. Wow.
And today's national average for conventional loans is 6.49.
6.49 is the national average for mortgage interest rates. How cool is that for conventional?
FHA is at 5.98.
All right.
Wow, FHA is at 5.98 with probably a pretty good FICO score, but still, that is pretty awesome to hear. National average.
6%.
VA is at 6%. Let's see if we've got anything.
FHA 5.9.
Oh,
Wow.
Today's national average.
Today's. Okay.
Tomorrow could be different.
okay.
What do you know?
I have one
Ne-
minute.
Next time, folks, you are trying to tell me something, please unmute yourself because I did not know that. I'm sorry if online you were not able to hear, comments there by Craig. Scott, I'm sorry about that. We were trying to have folks speak. I'll do that next time. Thank you. We'll go ahead and shut this down and you guys have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.